Well, as you might expect, I got absolutely no help from the Kino brothers. Those were just empty promises. So I was left here all alone in the shop to build our version of that Wethersfield, Connecticut highboard.
For 21 seasons, the new Yankee Workshop made woodworking look almost effortless. Norm Abram could walk into that Massachusetts workshop, pick up a piece of lumber, and turn it into something extraordinary before millions of viewers. Then, in 2009, he walked away. Not because PBS canceled the show, not because the ratings collapsed, but because he had made the decision himself. So why did Norm Abram leave a show that was still succeeding? And what had 2 decades of building, lifting, and working on concrete floors done to the man behind the legendary workshop? Join us as we uncover the real story behind Norm Abram's decision to walk away. The man whose father handed him the craft before anyone handed him a camera. The new Yankee Workshop did not become great television because a network found the right format. It became great television because the man standing at the bench was completely and irreplaceably the real thing. And that realness had roots that went back to before Norm Abram ever heard the word television. His father, Louis Abram, was a general contractor and builder in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. And from the time Norm was old enough to hold a tool, he worked alongside him, not watching, working. By the time he was 9 years old, he was already building things with his father on weekends, and through every summer he can remember, which means that by the time he eventually appeared in front of a camera in 1979, he had been at this for the better part of 30 years. He attended the University of Massachusetts Amherst, started in mechanical engineering, switched to business administration, and eventually left without completing a degree. A biographical detail that matters because it tells you something about who he was. He was not a person who needed an institution to validate what he knew. He had been learning the real thing since childhood, and he understood it at a level no classroom could have accelerated him to. In 1976, he founded his own construction firm, Integrated Structures, Inc., in Carlisle, Massachusetts. He was 26 years old and already running a business built entirely on the knowledge his father had passed him. That is when Russell Morrish, the television producer who would eventually be responsible for most of what made Norm Abram famous, commissioned him to build a barn. Russell was so struck by Norm's competence on the job that he invited him to appear as the master carpenter on a new PBS series called This Old House, which premiered in 1979 with Bob Vila as host and Norm as the man who actually did the work. He was not hired to be a television personality. He was hired to be a carpenter. The camera was simply there while he did what he had always done. That distinction between being a television personality who performs craft and being a craftsman who happens to be on television is the foundation of everything that made the new Yankee Workshop different from every home improvement show that came before or after it. And it is also the root of why ending it cost what it cost. The new Yankee Workshop launched in January 1989 as a spin-off of This Old House. Filmed in the small building that Norm had built in Marash's backyard in 1979, later moved to a purpose-built 36 by 26-foot shop behind a Massachusetts farmhouse, whose location Norm protected. The shop had radiant heat in the concrete floor, skylights for natural light, and every tool Norm needed to build anything. It also had, as he acknowledged in interviews, one significant problem: the concrete floor itself, which he said left him longing for a softer wooden surface after every long shooting day. That concrete floor was where the ending of the new Yankee Workshop actually began, accumulating its damage one filming session at a time. What does it cost a human body to stand on unpadded concrete for 8 to 12 hours a day across 2 decades while doing genuinely heavy physical work? The hidden math of making a 30-minute television episode. The version of the new Yankee Workshop that viewers experienced at home was a 30-minute PBS episode, half an hour of beautifully paced woodworking instruction, delivered by a man whose calm and methodical manner made even complicated joinery look approachable. What that 30-minute experience concealed was a production reality that was drastically more demanding than any other home improvement show on television. Each episode, which aired in 22 minutes of content, required up to 60 hours of actual work, preparation, and filming. Norm did not just host the show, he did all the actual work himself. Every cut, every joint, every mistake, and retake. This was not a show where producers brought in a skilled craftsman to handle the difficult parts off camera and then position the host in front of the finished result. The whole premise of the show was that Norm built everything, that everything he built was real, and that every step of the build was shown on camera so viewers at home could follow the same process. That premise required the actual building to take place at a full professional standard, with cameras running throughout. He developed joint pain, back issues, and plantar fasciitis from standing 8 to 12 hours on unpadded concrete across the production seasons. A medical check in 2008 found his grip strength had dropped by 23% since 2003. The grip of a master carpenter, the physical quality most central to his ability to do what he did, was measurably declining. Not because of age alone, but because of the sustained physical demands of 2 decades of standing and lifting and cutting and clamping and repeating on a surface that offered no give at all beneath his feet. The show was not the same as his part-time role on This Old House. The new Yankee Workshop was a full-time grind during production seasons. Norm worked 40 to 60 hours a week during filming, in addition to the prep time each project required. This Old House was structured around job sites where Norm was one expert among several, moving in and out as his expertise was needed. The new Yankee Workshop was structured around a single man in a single shop who was responsible for every phase of every project in every episode of every season for 21 years. The shop's concrete floor had radiant heating, which Russell and Norm had installed during the original design phase, but radiant heat-warming concrete does not produce the same physical experience for a body that has been standing on it all day that a sprung wooden floor would. Norm said in interviews that, despite the radiant heating, he consistently longed for a softer surface by the end of a shooting day, suggesting that the warmth of the floor addressed one aspect of the problem while leaving the structural hardness of concrete entirely intact. The math of 60 hours of work per 22 minutes of broadcast content, multiplied across 284 episodes, 21 seasons, and 2 decades, yields a number that represents an extraordinary volume of physical work done by a single person on a hard surface. The body that absorbed all that work did not do so without accumulating damage, and by 2008, the damage was manifesting in specific, measurable ways. So when the moment of decision arrived, what actually tipped Norm Abram from still going to done? A show ended anyway. This is the part of the new Yankee Workshop story that makes it genuinely different from almost every other television ending. And that reveals something important about who Norm Abram is as a person. The show did not end because anyone wanted it to end except him. Norm later confirmed that the entire duration of the show was fully funded through underwriting and that it could have continued. But he decided he had accomplished everything he wanted to do and wanted to spend more time with his family. There was no external pressure forcing the decision. The decision came from Norm himself, After months of conversations with producer Russell Marash and WGBH Boston, and it was driven by a combination of the physical reality of what the show had been taking from his body and the personal reality of what the show's schedule had been taking from his time with his family. As Russell put it when the ending was announced, the show simply could not continue without Norm. There was no replacement, and there never would be. The producers decided not to find a replacement for Norm, as the show was identified with the much-loved Carpenter, and a new person would likely fail to compare with him. When WGBH Boston announced the show's end on October 16, 2009, the fan response was enormous and immediate, with woodworking communities and PBS audiences treating the news with the particular grief that comes from losing something woven into a weekly routine for years. Commenters on Fine Woodworking's website described their children growing up watching what they called the Hammer shows, identified Norm as the person who had inspired them to pick up woodworking in the first place, and compared his departure to losing Julia Child. The suggestion being that what both of them had done was translate a skilled craft into television that was both genuinely educational and genuinely compelling, without compromising either quality for the other. Norm's own statement when the ending was announced was characteristically direct. "We've had a great run, built challenging projects, met wonderful woodworkers, and received loyal support from millions of viewers." He was 59 years old when the show ended. He had been doing this since 1979. He was not done with carpentry. He was done with a production schedule that was extracting more from his body than his body was any longer willing to give. And contrary to the assumption that greeted the announcement, he had no intention of quietly retiring. What did he actually do with the years between the new Yankee Workshop ending in 2009 and his eventual full retirement from television 13 years later? The awards nobody talked about enough. The assumption among many fans when the new Yankee Workshop ended was that Norm Abram was effectively retiring, stepping back from public life, building things in private, and living the kind of post-television existence that most people in their late 50s would find entirely appropriate after the volume of work he had produced. The assumption was wrong. He continued as master carpenter on This Old House, the show that had launched his television career 30 years earlier, and maintained that role for 13 more years after the new Yankee Workshop ended, appearing in hundreds of additional episodes, continuing to bring the same quality of expertise and the same unhurried, trustworthy manner to the job sites and restoration projects that the show had been built around since 1979. The pace was different from the new Yankee Workshop. He was one expert among several rather than the sole engine of a 30-minute production, which meant the physical demands were distributed differently, and the schedule, while still demanding for a man in his 60s and then his 70s, was not the 60 hours of work per episode grind that the woodshop show had required. During those 13 years, he earned recognition that reflected the true depth of what he had contributed to American craft culture. In 2009, the American Academy of Ophthalmology gave him its inaugural EyeSmart Distinguished Service Award for his decades-long habit of beginning every new Yankee Workshop episode with a reminder to put on safety glasses, a habit so consistent across the show's run that it became one of its most recognizable signatures, and that the ophthalmology community credited with meaningfully influencing eye safety awareness among the show's DIY audience. The award acknowledged something that most television analysis of the show never properly appreciated: that Norm's emphasis on safety was not a legal disclaimer for producers. It was a genuine commitment, delivered consistently across 284 episodes, by a man who understood that the people watching him were going to go into their own garages and try what they had just seen, and who felt personally responsible for what happened when they did. In 2019, Old Sturbridge Village gave him the Ken Burns Lifetime Achievement Award for his lifelong dedication to historic preservation, recognition that placed his work in a context beyond entertainment or instruction, and acknowledged what the reproduction furniture projects and historical episode intros of the new Yankee Workshop had actually been doing across their 21-year run. Every time Norm visited a historic house or a museum collection at the beginning of an episode to examine an original piece before reproducing it in his workshop, he was doing something that functioned as documentary, preserving visual and technical knowledge about how those original objects were built, made accessible to an audience of millions who would never otherwise have had reason to encounter it. He also remained active on the Board of Trustees of Old Sturbridge Village in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, a living history museum that preserves and demonstrates the crafts and trades of early New England, which is as direct an expression of what Norm Abram cares about as any television appearance he ever made. The man who had spent 21 seasons reproducing antique American furniture was also sitting on the board of the institution dedicated to preserving the context from which that furniture came. And then, in May 2022, came the announcement that was not entirely unexpected, but was still genuinely significant. What did retirement at 72, after 43 years of television, actually look like for a man whose identity had always been defined by the act of making things with his hands? The retirement announcement and health speculation. In May 2022, after 43 years as master carpenter on this old house, Norm Abram announced his retirement from the series. He was 72 years old, and the announcement prompted both the expected outpouring of appreciation from the audience that had been watching since 1979 and a wave of speculation about his health, which he had not invited, but the internet generated regardless. Fans noted visible weight loss in his later appearances, fueling unconfirmed rumors about a cancer diagnosis. The official explanation for his retirement was the natural physical toll of a demanding career. Norm did not confirm or deny health issues beyond the physical realities he had already discussed publicly: the joint pain, the back issues, the accumulated cost of decades of heavy physical work. He never made his health a public drama, and the retirement announcement was framed around the desire to spend more time with his family and pursue personal projects, which is both entirely credible and entirely consistent with who he had always been. PBS aired a 1-hour tribute special titled The House That Norm Built on October 3, 2022, which surveyed his career with the program and brought together friends, peers, and people whose working lives had been shaped by watching him. The tribute's reception emphasized the quality of what Norm Abram had meant to the people who watched him, not celebrity affection, but something closer to gratitude from people who had actually built things because of him, who had designed and built kitchens and designed workshops and attempted furniture projects they would not have attempted without the specific reassurance that his manner provided. The man who had spent more than 40 years on television telling people they could do this had apparently, for a significant number of them, been right. What he did next, rather than retreating entirely from the craft world, reflected the priorities of a man who had always been a craftsman first and a television personality second. He began building a new private workshop near his Rhode Island home, not for the cameras, but for himself, the workshop he had earned through decades of building for everyone else. Reports emerged of a developing interest in shipbuilding, a discipline that represents the full complexity end of woodworking, and that requires exactly the kind of sustained, detailed, technically demanding engagement that has always been where Norm Abram finds his satisfaction. In 2023, shortly after his official retirement from this old house, he and Russell decided to unveil a redesigned website where project plans were still available, and launched the new Yankee Workshop YouTube channel. where all of the show's episodes are available to view for free for future generations of woodworkers. That decision, to make the full archive of the new Yankee Workshop available free to anyone who wanted to learn from it, rather than monetizing it through a subscription service, is the most Norm Abram possible way to handle a television legacy. He built the episodes. He taught the skills. He is not going to put those skills behind a paywall. By 2025, the YouTube channel had become a genuine resource for a new generation of woodworkers who had discovered it without any memory of watching the show's original broadcast run. People who were encountering Norm Abram and his workshop for the first time through a platform that did not exist when the show was made. Learning techniques from episodes filmed 3 decades earlier because the techniques were correct, and the teaching was clear, and the man demonstrating them was obviously, completely, and irreplaceably the real thing. Did you watch the new Yankee Workshop growing up? And did Norm Abram inspire you to pick up woodworking for the first time? Or to build something you would not have otherwise attempted? And now that the full archive is free on YouTube, is this the moment to go back and learn something from the master? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.